New York City's newest housing director views homeownership as a weapon of white supremacy. Today on The Deep Dive, we're exploring the radical ideology now shaping city policy and what it means for the middle-class dream. Welcome to The Deep Dive. We're looking at a seismic shift in urban governance coming out of New York City, and the shift is really challenging the fundamental relationship that millions of Americans have with private property. We're not talking about small changes here.
No, not at all. This is a complete philosophical overhaul. The core news hook, the event that kicked all of this off, was the January 1st, 2026 appointment of Cea Weaver.
Right, as the director of the mayor's office to protect tenants.
Exactly. The new mayor, Zohran Mamdani, who is a very prominent Democratic Socialist, put Weaver, a key DSA organizer herself, into one of the most powerful housing roles in the entire country.
And her appointment just immediately became this national flashpoint, mostly because of her history of advocating for what her critics are calling the systematic dismantling of private property rights.
It's a conflict over the city's entire economic foundation. And it all crystallizes in this one quote, a station Weaver made back in 2019 that's now, everywhere.
I've seen it.
She said, "Private property, including and kind of especially homeownership, is a weapon of white supremacy masquerading as wealth-building public policy."
That is just extraordinary rhetoric for someone in such a high-level city government role. So our mission today is to dive into the source material. What are the roots of this ideology that's being labeled Marxism in the metropolis? And what does this collectivist agenda actually mean for New Yorkers? For their taxes, their savings, their security? Let's unpack it.
To really get the policy, you have to start with the ideology. Cea Weaver, her background is as a key figure in housing justice for all, but her views really pull from a hard-left critique of property that, goes all the way back to Karl Marx.
And that's where the Marxism in the metropolis label comes from, right? Because she's arguing for this fundamental transformation of property. She says it has to go from being an individualized good to a collective good. So what does that actually mean? For our listeners who know New York, co-ops are everywhere. Isn't that already a form of collective ownership?
That's a really crucial distinction to make. A traditional co-op or a condo, that's still private property. You own it jointly, but you as the individual have equity. You can build wealth, you can pass it to your kids, you can sell it for a profit.
Okay.
When Weaver talks about a collective good, she's arguing for a model that actively removes that profit motive. She's pushing for things like land trusts or social housing, where the state or maybe a community body owns the land itself, and they control the affordability forever.
So this is what she means by shared equity. That's the term I've seen her use a lot.
That's the one. Shared equity basically means you might buy the apartment, the actual structure, but the land underneath it is owned by someone else, like a land trust. And they put heavy restrictions on how much you can sell it for.
So it keeps the unit affordable for the next person.
Exactly. It stabilizes costs, but it fundamentally caps the wealth you, as the owner, can build. It severs that link between homeownership and financial mobility.
And this is where the conversation, it just becomes explicitly racialized. Weaver was very clear about who she thinks will be most affected by this change.
She was. In discussing this shift, she said, and this is a direct quote, that the new vision will mean that families, especially white families, are going to have a different relationship to property than we currently have.
Wow.
And, critics cited in the sources see that as a clear admission of targeting. They argue she's using this anti-racist justification to dismantle a core economic institution.
And this isn't just Weaver acting alone. It's clearly coming from the top. Mayor Mamdani, in his inaugural address, he pledged to, replace the frigidity of rugged individualism with the warmth of collectivism.
Right. And that's more than just a nice phrase. It connects their shared ideology directly to government action. When he says he wants to replace rugged individualism, he's basically saying he's going to use the power of the state, billions in funding union labor public land, to just take the profit motive out of the housing market entirely.
Okay, so let's translate that ideology into, actual governance.
Yes.
If you view homeownership as racist or a failed public policy, what does that mean for the city's budget?
It means the public sector has to take over. That's the bottom line. They see private developers as inherently part of the problem, so the only solution is for the city to become the primary builder and manager of housing itself.
And they're putting serious money behind this. Mayor Mamdani is proposing a stunning $100 billion commitment over 10 years.
It's a monumental amount of capital.
Yeah.
And that $100 billion is meant to do two things. First, double the investment to fix the city's existing public housing, which is, falling apart. And second, to triple the production of new publicly subsidized housing.
And the goal is what, 200,000 new units?
The stated goal is 200,000 new, permanently affordable, union-built units over that decade.
200,000 units. I mean, that's a logistical mountain. If you're bypassing private developers, where is all this land supposed to come from? How do you even manage a project that big?
That's the question all the critics are asking. The plan is to use public land, to pool different rental assistance programs together, maybe acquire some struggling private buildings. But, the sources point out that just the bureaucracy alone, the zoning, the environmental reviews, coordinating with unions on that scale, it makes that 200,000 unit goal seem, well, extremely challenging.
And who are these units for, specifically?
They're earmarked for families who earn less than $70,000 a year. And that number is important. $70,000 is the median income for renters in the city, but it's well below the overall median household income.
Which is closer to 93,000.
Exactly. So by targeting that lower earning segment, they're really focusing the policy on economic redistribution, on the most acute part of the affordability crisis.
And that brings us to the money. How do you fund a $100 billion plan? This leads straight to the tax proposal, which has caused a huge firestorm.
Of course. Mamdani is proposing pretty substantial property tax increases, and he's been very direct in defending them, saying they target what he described as richer and whiter neighborhoods.
He actually used those words.
He did. Now, his justification is that it's an economic assessment. He argues that New York's tax system is structurally unfair, that it's favored wealthy homeowners for a long, long time.
Okay, so can you break that down for us? How does the current system actually favor those areas?
Well, the city's property tax system is famously complicated. But basically, 1 to 3 family homes, which you find a lot of in wealthier, whiter boroughs like Staten Island, they're often assessed at just a fraction of their market value compared to, say, a big apartment building.
So a millionaire in a brownstone might be paying a lower effective tax rate than a renter in a high-rise in a less wealthy neighborhood.
That's the structural issue, yes. So Mamdani's argument is that he's fixing a real tax inequity. But critics say that when you pair that racially explicit language with Weaver's ideology about homeownership being white supremacy, it stops sounding like a tax fix.
And it starts sounding like social targeting.
It's characterized as a policy of collective punishment against certain demographics.
Of course, the only reason any of this is politically possible is because of the sheer desperation. We have to remember the context here.
The context is dire. New York has the highest level of homelessness since the Great Depression. The wait lists for affordable housing they're staggering. When the city opened its rent payment wait list, more than 630,000 people applied.
For a program that helps how many?
About 250 people a month. That level of crisis empowers an administration to say the old system is broken and only radical change will work. So the policy proposals were already deeply concerning for opponents, targeting private property and individual wealth. But the controversy really truly escalated when some of Weaver's older, non-housing-related comments resurfaced.
Right. These were public social media posts from a few years back, between 2017 and 2018. Let's go through some of them because critics pointed to these as proof that her ideology goes way beyond just housing policy.
The sources cite a few key posts. There was a 2017 statement where she reportedly endorsed a "No More White Men in Office" platform. And then, maybe more inflammatory, a 2018 post where she apparently called to impoverish the white middle class.
Then there were the comments that seemed more personal, directed at groups of people. One where she supposedly wished that all white men who take credit for the work of women of color would one day burn.
Yes, and another very controversial comment about children. She wrote about seeing a group of minors saying, "Came across a mob of 11-year-old white boy children. I don't know why we keep procreating."
And opponents, conservative groups cited in the material, they seized on these immediately. They said this is evidence of, and I think the quote was, class and now race warfare.
They argued her policies aren't about fairness, but are driven by a kind of dangerous racialist framework that's looking for retribution.
It also raises this really interesting structural question, a question critics are asking. If homeownership is a weapon of white supremacy, what does that mean for all the New Yorkers of color who are homeowners?
That's the economic warning at the heart of the critique. According to the city's own data, about 1/3 of Black families and 1/5 of Hispanic families in New York City own their homes.
So are they participating in white supremacy?
Well, that's the question critics are posing. Are these citizens who overcame massive systemic barriers to build that wealth, Are they now seen by the administration as part of the problem?
Now, to be fair, we have to contextualize why her office uses this language. Her supporters defend her, and they point to the very real history of systemic inequity in housing, things like redlining.
And that's the counterargument. That's what gives her rhetoric its political power. Redlining, where banks would deny mortgages based on the racial makeup of a neighborhood, it systematically blocked families of color from building wealth for generations. From her perspective, the system itself is structurally racist, so any wealth built on top of it is, tainted.
And the only solution, in her view, is to completely restructure property ownership itself to make up for that history.
Correct. But it creates this incredibly volatile political situation where the rhetoric is so charged that you risk alienating not just your opponents, but maybe even people who agree with you on affordable housing, but still want that chance to build wealth through property.
So let's try to synthesize this. What we've looked at today is a city administration that has appointed a director who sees the very foundation of the middle-class private property as a weapon of racial oppression.
And who has, in the past, publicly called for the impoverishment of a specific demographic. We've also reviewed the massive policy stakes here. A proposed $100 billion plan designed to completely shift the city toward a collectivist, state-run housing system.
It's a foundational change, not an incremental one, an attempt to transform New York's entire economic relationship with its own assets.
And the outcome of this huge social and economic experiment, it's being watched all over the country. It's one of the most aggressive attempts in modern America to enact this kind of hard-left, property-skeptical agenda.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you, our listener. Mayor Mamdani has already said he's worried about New York's shrinking tax base, about high earners moving to other states.
Given that economic pressure, what is the long-term price paid in tax revenue, in jobs, and economic stability when a major global city's leadership openly declares war on the very concepts of individual wealth creation and private property that have, for centuries, underpinned its entire economic engine?